Hello, my curious cats, and welcome back to another episode of the Say Psychology podcast, the podcast for all the info on psychology's most questionable history. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez, PhD student and psychology nerd. Alright, so if you guys are watching or listening, there is no doubt that you are giant curious cats like myself. Anything that has to do with like psychology, history, true crime, and all the gray area in between, that is my passion, that is my love. And if you guys are here, I hope you guys share the same love as I do. And one thing about me is the best part of my day, any time of day, well, besides going to the gym, is the 90-minute to 2-hour time frame that I have for myself getting ready for work. And yeah, you heard that right. I spend 90 minutes to 2 hours getting ready in the morning. And I have no shame, okay? Like, it takes time to look good. And I work at a place where I like to look nice. Well, I'm expected to look nice. So, what can I say? I've always just been kind of prissy like that. Like, I laugh about it now, but I'll never forget this one time. I was talking to a guy, it was about a few years ago, and we got on a couple of dates. Everything was going great, And then one morning, just good morning, and he asked me, hey, I was just curious, like, how long does it take you to get ready in the mornings? And I answered honestly, which in hindsight, that was my problem. That was my fault. I was too honest with the man. So I told him, just 90 minutes to 2 hours. It kind of depends on the morning. And he responded with, say what now? And I said, yeah, like I said, it depends. Is my outfit, my hair, or my makeup a little extra for the day? I might need some extra time. And I kid you not, that was the last time I had ever heard from him. So Brayden, if you're still out there, it does in fact still take me 90 minutes to 2 hours to get ready in the mornings. Like, I bring this up because that 2-hour time frame, it's either the gym or that 2-hour time frame that I really only have to myself. So I like to really just take it in, freshly showered, doing my hair, doing my makeup, and either a true crime or a history podcast playing in the background. That is my me time. And I'm not much of a horror fan when it comes to podcasts. Like, if I'm being completely honest, I am a pussy for murder anything, really. Like, I don't mind the gory stuff. I actually find that kind of cool, like guts and gores and blood. But when it comes to like jump scare horror, no, that's not me. That's not me. Movies, nope. TV, nope. Podcast, nope. Nope. But a pattern I've noticed, being the nerd that I am, is that storytellers love a good exorcism. And I mean, I'm sure they're just catering to their audience, so here I am catering to my audience. I'm sure it's not too hard to believe, but there is a history of exorcisms being done to try and cure certain mental disorders. Whether they worked or not is up for debate and also up for interpretation. So if you're a little bit insane in the membrane like me, get cozy tozy and let's jump into it. Alright, so one thing we've learned for certain throughout the journey of this whole podcast is that people with mental disorders haven't exactly been viewed with the kindest eyes. All throughout history, we see the different ways in which mentally ill individuals are treated with only the harshest of conditions. For a very long time, specifically around the 1400s, it was believed by many that mental illness was caused by either possession or witchcraft. In come exorcisms. Exorcisms are the religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons or other spiritual entities from a person or an area that's believed to be possessed. It has been a spectacle for horror movies everywhere for as long as our young minds can remember. The ancient practice is very much a part of cultural mythology and occupies an important place in some religious entities, most notably the Catholic Church. No one can really say with absolute certainty whether there are certain beings that can take control of living beings, but science can offer a helpful window into the act and what might cause a person to appear possessed. It is important to know that the DSM-5 doesn't recognize the possession of spirits as a psychiatric issue. There is very little doubt, however, about the influence of issues that are recognized by the DSM-5. And one thing about the APA, no one questions the power of suggestion. Now, what exactly causes someone to appear as if they were possessed? Historically, exorcisms have been used to treat a wide variety of symptoms that today are correctly associated with actual mental disorders. Individuals with schizophrenia, personality issues, hysteria, or even severe depression could at some point have been considered candidates for an exorcism in generations past. That's because there are disorders that in some cases can cause unusual or to some frightening behaviors. So like the thing is, these unusual and frightening behaviors that align with certain mental disorders may also align with what some cultures consider a possession. For example, an individual with schizophrenia might believe that they hear the voice of a certain spirit, or in some cases that they themselves are that spirit. Other disorders, including epilepsy, substance abuse, and brain tumors, might cause similar effects. Also, many of these disorders can cause an individual to have severe seizures and altered behavior, leading someone to appear as if they were possessed. From about the late 1400s to late 1600s, a common belief in some religious organizations was that some people made pacts with certain spirits and committed horrible acts. By horrible, I mean as far as eating babies. And I'm not even kidding. Just no comment on that. These horrible people were considered to be witches and were tried and condemned by the court system. Think like the Salem witch trials times 100. It's funny because if you think about it, we've always had this argument of the church versus the state, right? Because exorcisms were seen as a work of a religious entity such as the Catholic Church. They were to get rid of evil spirits that had taken over someone's whole body. But here comes the state, and they were like, no, we can't have these people walking among us. What do you mean, treat them? We need to completely get rid of them. Fucking eye roll, right? We really haven't changed much, have we? Also, when it comes to religion, exorcisms are most commonly associated with the Catholic Church, right? But they can be found in various other religious readings. For example, in the first 4 books of the New Testament of the Christian Bible, the story of Jesus of Nazareth casting away evil spirits, especially in the book of Mark. In the New Testament, Jesus' exorcisms were evidence of his authority over the devil. They showed that he, Jesus, had the spiritual power. Now, I do believe I've expressed this on here on multiple occasions, but personally, I am a Christian by heart and by faith. Not that kind of Christian though, because I do still believe in women's reproductive rights, and I do still believe that immigrants have every right to be here, because you know who else was an immigrant? Jesus. Okay, so yes, I am a Christian by faith and heart, but I also do study psychology. And although through a scientific point of view, psychology and religion haven't always gone along. And I mean, the most famous psychologist of all time once claimed that religion and psychology don't mix. I am talking about Freud. I guess a lot of it has to do with not implementing science into spiritual world views, which, don't get me wrong, I totally get it and I totally see it and I totally respect it, but it is important to always keep an open mind, especially nowadays when it's gone to a point where religion and politics have seemed to almost become one. If you know anything about the Christian faith, you know that the Republican is anything but. Okay, but that's all I have to say about that. Argue with your mama. Unless she's a Trump supporter, then good luck, because it's literally like talking to a whoopee cushion. So anyways, that was a bit of a rant, but no one asked for. But you got it. Well, speaking of the New Testament, at the time of the New Testament, illnesses were thought to be caused by demonic possession. This belief fed the, business, if you will, of exorcism well into the medieval period. These illnesses ranged from hearing voices to having seizures or being overcome by insatiable and uncontrollable urges. If anyone you knew showed any of these signs, you yourself would have likely gone to your local priest, not your local physician or even psychologist. I guess you could say that the religious misdiagnosis of demonic possession was a mental illness in itself. I wish I could say that this is something completely in the past and that doctors eventually did figure out that it was not a demonic possession, but rather a mental disorder. But this is something that is very much alive today. The difference being that it's a lot, and I mean a lot, less common today than it was in medieval times. Also, it is seen with much less kinder eyes than it was back then. Thank goodness, right? Science and basic knowledge about the human mind have taught us that when a person is hearing voices, more likely than not, they're schizophrenic and not that they've been possessed, you know? After the medieval times, as the years went by and Puritanism spread to the New World, the general public considered the idea of exorcisms more of a superstition than a legitimate ritual. They dismissed the practice as barbaric and favored more modern treatments such as trepanation, which, if you remember all the way back to our first episode of season 3, trepanation was the very first lobotomy. So, yes, moving forward, kind of in the right direction, I guess you could say, kind of. So yeah, one step forward for sure. It wasn't until the bizarre case of Meriwether Cranstock that exorcisms came back into the public eye. The year was 1892 in Milford, Connecticut. A known atheist and haberdasher by the name Meriwether Cranstock had been noted to be behaving very strangely. People around town reported seeing him wearing socks on his hands, pretending he was a caribou, whistling the song Free Bird backwards, and just a lot of weird things going on that he typically would not be normally known for. If I'm being honest, it's giving 2007 Britney Spears. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And if that's the case, I completely get it. I too have found myself crashing out a lot lately, actually. But as for Cranstock, a service was held at the Hope Eternal Church where Cranstock was handcuffed and 7 priests took turns chasing him around the church altar and tickling him in front of the entire congregation. Which, why can't modern day exorcisms be handled like this anymore? I would totally go to one. Well, to observe. Well, when the service concluded, Cranstock's hands were unshackled and he flawlessly whistled the tune to Freebird from beginning to end instead of backwards. So after which he dropped to his knees, wept, and praised the Lord Almighty. So in a way, things turned out great. Question mark? Now, it is not to say that demonic possession is not a thing, okay? As an academic, of course, I believe that there is basis to an evidence-based diagnosis. However, as a Christian, of course, I believe in the possibility of possession per the biblical tellings. There have been cases where the case of a possession has rendered an actual possibility. Historically, many cases of possession have marked major psychiatric disorders. And sadly, there continue to be cases in which symptoms of different mental disorders are still being classified as demonic possession by priests today. Just as recently as 2010, for example, a 28-year-old patient whom we'll call Susie, okay, had been previously diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. She spent the last 5 years being treated at a psychosis unit in Spain with a number of different drugs, such as clozapine, olanzapine, and a bunch of other peens, with very little to no response. The thing about schizophrenic treatment, well, really any mental treatment for that matter, is that it is nothing without patient insight to the response of their current treatment plan. One thing to note is that Susie herself was very religious, okay? I'm talking like attended mass like throughout the entire week. But she was also a very smart cookie. So her educated self believed that half of her symptoms were due to the mental disorder that she'd been diagnosed with. But her spiritual self believed that the other half were due to the presence of a spiritual being. Homegirl was tired, okay? She didn't know what to believe anymore. At this point, her only wish was to, quote, remove all her symptoms. Since she was seeing almost no improvement with the medical treatments, she decided to take the religious route. She hopped on her computer, because this is 2010, remember, and found a very willing clergyman. The clergyman was a renowned expert on exorcisms. How did she know this? He'd also been known to make a number of TV appearances, if that tells you anything about him. When Susie met with him, he created this almost like treatment plan for her, in which she received a total of 8 sessions of exorcism. Susie really believed this was it. She recalls deeper sleep and feeling more restful after each session. Susie may have been feeling better, but the people around her began to express distrust about the exorcisms because of what the exorcisms did to Susie during her sessions. During her sessions, Susie would shout, violently squirm, contort her body, and occasionally vomit, all during the same sessions, which honestly, if you know anything about exorcisms, like if you've listened or if you've seen videos or movies, this is actually kind of common, right? But the people who didn't know, they were like, yo, this is crazy, like what's going on, right? And like with all due respect, right? Like I totally get what they're getting at. When her friends and family saw that these sessions were what these sessions were doing to Susie, they took it upon themselves to contact multiple therapists in the unit she was staying at for their professional opinions. With actual professional help, Susie was practically yanked away from these priests. You can imagine. That didn't fare well with Susie though, because remember, she wasn't seeing a lot of improvement in the medical area, so she herself decided to take the religious route. After she was forbidden to see these priests, she fell into a deep depression. Awesome, because initially we were only dealing with schizophrenia, now we got a depression to cure as well. Medical professionals had to sit down with her on multiple occasions to explain to her the extremity of her condition and why it was medically based, not spiritually based. They also sat down with a special internet clergyman to explain to him of her psychiatric diagnosis. Whether he cared or listened is unknown, but we could only probably speculate. As for Susie, they started her on an antidepressive treatment and upped her dosage on the schizophrenic medication. Again, this was in 2010, okay? 15 years ago, yes, but if we think about the fact that exorcisms to treat mental illness have been around since medieval times, we realize just how bad this is. Susie's case is just one small example out of hundreds of stories of mental disorders being misinterpreted as demonic possessions. It's not to say that the Catholic Church hasn't learned a thing or two over the past centuries, okay? Tread lightly. Let's tread lightly. I don't want anyone coming after me. The Roman Catholic Church's official diagnostic criteria for discerning genuine demonic possession includes speaking in tongues or languages formerly unfamiliar to the possessed person, supernatural physical strength, and visibly negative reactions of the victim to prayers, holy water, priests, etc. So definitely a lot more than just your typical epileptic seizure or schizophrenic symptoms. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it took us a while, but we finally made it, okay? But for the modern church, physical and or psychiatric disorders must first be ruled out. That is another plus, another groundbreaking step that we took, okay? Thank God. Literally. From a psychiatric perspective, the problem with such criteria is that these phenomena can be found in many mental disorders, including dissociative and psychotic disorders of various sorts. What can I say, right? You win some, you lose some. It's part of the beauty of the gray area that is psychology, the endless why. As someone with a strong faith, I kind of wish the topic of exorcisms hadn't been turned into such a subject because it is a topic that can be found in scripture. But sadly, it really began to be known as this horror topic in the mid to late 1900s when the book and the movie The Exorcist came out. With it followed a whole slew of business ventures taking advantage of very impressionable minds. Franchises everywhere released limited edition everything from holy water to actual crucifix toys and Happy Meals. Even the Vatican saw these times as a way to make easy money. The Vatican started their infamous Sacred program, SACRED, which stood for Spiritual Apprentices Conditioned for Rigorous Exorcism Duties, a program designed to groom, because that's what it was, let's be honest, a program designed to groom the younger generation to be future exorcists. It is so not funny because of all places. Are we surprised? Honestly, it's the Vatican, the Catholic Church. Honestly, no, because compared to a bajillion things the Catholic Church is known for, this is like tip of the iceberg. But believe it or not, this program lasted until November of 2017, only after Pope Francis eliminated the program. Well, one thing's for certain. The history of exorcisms is and has always been a fascinating reflection of the psychological impact that the fear of the unknown has on the human psyche. If anything, it's just a reminder that this ancient ritual is still alive in our collective consciousness. Well, my curious cats, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. It definitely took a weird turn, that's for sure. This episode wasn't about the history of exorcisms per se. I mean, there are whole movies, TV series, and podcasts just on that alone. Okay, so don't come for me if I miss something. Please and thank you. But if you did enjoy today's episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and follow on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and Apple Podcasts. And please share with all your friends and family. The support is immensely appreciated. You have no idea. As always, citations will be in the description if you want to check those out. Stay blessed, stay safe, and stay psyched. I love you. Bye.